At this point, I'm almost certain that we're going to get the reveal for Final Fantasy IX Remake at the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. And it's fun to theorise, so let's get into it. We first caught wind that Final Fantasy IX Remake was even a possibility after the famous Nvidia leaks of 2021. If you somehow missed anything to do with this, it was one of the biggest leaks in the history of the games industry, where a huge number of upcoming games were prematurely revealed, with almost every title mentioned either having been announced or already released since then. In fact, some of the only titles still to be announced or confirmed are the Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster and Final Fantasy IX Remake. With no other information, you could reasonably assume that a remake was more a question of when than if, but we do have more information. Not 3 months after the Nvidia leaks, an official announcement was made that Square had ordered the development of a Final Fantasy IX anime series by French-based Cyber Group Studios. There were never any updates on this until recently, when it was revealed that Cyber Group had gone bankrupt, presumably halting any production on the series. There have been some prospective buyout offers since then, but there's no confirmation of whether it's still going ahead. Though we did get a leak recently revealing that the plot was to be a sequel following the lives of Vivi's 6 children. An anime series for a 25-year-old game with no other projects in the works seems very unlikely, but a companion anime series made to support a remake or at least some other sort of update or rework would surely prove popular. We also had another leak from the Epic Games Store where they listed a code-named DLC for an upcoming game that included Tetramaster Starter Pack, a Thieves' Knives pre-order bonus, as well as a cuisine set. Pretty obvious stuff. There have been regular affirmations from various insiders and leakers that Final Fantasy IX Remake does exist. The now infamous leaker Midori claimed that Square had pulled back development of the remake from a team they originally outsourced it to, and more recently, popular leaker Nate the Hate confidently stated that both Final Fantasy IX Remake and Final Fantasy Tactics remasters are still coming at some point. If we assume that Final Fantasy IX Remake existed well before the Nvidia leak in 2021, then it's been in development for an absolute minimum of 4 years by this point, and depending on the scale of the project and point at which it was brought back in-house, there should be something of a good-looking game to show off by now. This leads me on to my next point, which is that Square Enix's 2025 release calendar is completely and utterly barren. Other than the recent PC port of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, as well as the Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D remakes, and Kingdom Hearts Missing Link coming at some point this year, Square have absolutely nothing else confirmed for 2025. I suppose there's a not zero chance that any of these TBA titles like Dragon Quest 12 or Kingdom Hearts 4 drop this year unexpectedly, but there seems to be no buzz around either of them coming out anytime soon. It could just be that Square's having a quiet year to focus their efforts on other projects. Last year, it was confirmed in a company memo that they would cancel $140 million worth of games to focus on more quality over quantity going forward. This seemed to come off the back of a string of underperformances and failures from things like Forspoken, Foam Stars, The First Soldier, and so many others, where they just chucked out a huge number of mid-range, mid-budget, and live service titles one after the other, with nothing really breaking through. An obvious consequence of that is that some of those resources could have been redirected to make ongoing projects even better. If Final Fantasy IX Remake did come back in-house, then it would certainly make sense to boost its budget and make it the best game it possibly could be. Basically, the calendar is wide open for Square to focus on a big, exciting new game this year, and Final Fantasy IX Remake would get that job done quite nicely. So, what does any of this have to do with the Switch 2? Well, everything, I think. We know that Square wants to end console exclusivity deals of the past and get their games into the hands of as many players as possible, driven by disappointing sales figures for the recent PlayStation exclusives. With the Switch being one of the best-selling consoles of all time and the Switch 2 being backwards compatible, it makes sense to develop future titles with the Switch 2 in mind. The art style of Final Fantasy IX was always one of the things that made it stand out from the rest, and it's a very bright and colourful world that matches the sort of art style and imagery that fits really well with Nintendo's brand. Although no one knows what a remake project might look like in size and scope yet, the wonderful fan-made Memoria project gives us all a really good idea of what something could look like, and this is a game that would look right at home in Nintendo's ecosystem. Plenty of rumours have circulated around what the Switch 2 will be able to handle performance-wise, but there are some fairly credible claims that Final Fantasy VII Remake, Rebirth and Final Fantasy XVI will all be released for it at some point, as well as a number of other big AAA modern games. If that's the case, it should have no trouble running a hypothetical remake of Final Fantasy IX. We also need to consider that Nintendo are famously protective of their IP and branding, so they would surely want to launch their new hardware with titles that bolster the brand as much as possible. I think that Final Fantasy IX could be one of those games, and it would also help Square to signal their commitment to developing for multi-platform. Nintendo is also very secretive, and genuine leaks are fairly few and far between. We know that the Switch 2 Nintendo Direct will finally show off some of the games to look forward to. This apparently includes third-party developers, and we know that devs must have been working on Switch 2 games for quite some time to get them ready. But they won't be allowed to say that they're working on them, not yet. Nintendo will want to control any announcements as tightly as possible. All of this leads me to believe that Final Fantasy IX Remake will at least be announced at the upcoming Nintendo Direct. If my wildest dreams came true, it might even be on Switch 2 at launch, or at least shortly after. If Square had announced it before now, the impact of adding something like, "and also on Switch 2" in a trailer somewhere down the line probably wouldn't make waves at all. In other words, I think the reason we haven't heard anything of it before now is because Nintendo won't let Square say anything yet. I also think that other than a major unannounced new IP dropping this year and being an enormous success, something like Final Fantasy IX Remake is the only thing that could stand a chance of keeping Square's finances looking healthy in this quiet calendar year. I did have a brief exchange on social media with one of Square's PR guys recently, who hinted that they do have something exciting to reveal later this year, and liked my post where I suggested the Nintendo Direct date seemed to be a good day to look forward to. My most damning evidence so far, I'm sure you'll agree. Finally, and most recently, today Square Enix revealed a 25th anniversary celebration for Final Fantasy IX, including new key art and merchandise. The merchandise includes figures of Zidane and Garnet with facial designs that look suspiciously updated. The timing of this announcement is also very telling, because the anniversary of the game isn't until July. Why announce at the end of March unless you plan to link into a major gaming event only 3 days later? If we're ever going to get the Final Fantasy IX Remake, it feels really like its reveal is just around the corner, hopefully with the Final Fantasy Tactics remaster not far behind it. So, what do we think? Should I be stocking up on some clown makeup, or is there a hope in hell that we could be onto something here? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back here after the big reveal to see if we got it right.